Sontar's disappearance. Red. Tegan pulled open the door to her room and stuck her head out into the TARDIS corridor. During her time with the Doctor, she had got used to the various noises that the time machine made. She couldn't exactly say that the sounds it made were familiar, but she was acutely aware when a noise wasn't one she'd heard before. She didn't recognise this noise at all. So you heard it too? A voice from further down the corridor made her jump. Turlough! Tegan turned and glared at him. Do you have to sneak up on people like that? Sorry. Turlough looked hurt. I heard something, so I came out to investigate. Yeah, well, me too. Tegan pulled the door to her room closed and set off along the corridor, Turlough hurrying to keep up with her. It's coming from the console room, he said. Yes, Tegan frowned. It sounds a bit like singing. The two of them reached the door to the control room and paused, listening to the tuneless sounds coming from beyond. It's the Doctor, said Turlough in astonishment. Tegan pushed open the door and the two of them peered through. The Doctor was standing with his back to them, his attention firmly on the controls of the recently refurbished central console. He was singing loudly to himself, arms waving as if conducting some invisible orchestra. As tuneless as it was, Tegan laughed as she realised the Doctor was singing a Christmas carol. Many happy returns of the season, Doctor! He jumped at the sound of her voice, spinning round and giving her an embarrassed smile. Ah! Tegan! Turlough! Good morning. What on earth are you doing? Turlough said, grinning broadly. The Doctor bustled around the console sheepishly. Well, now that the TARDIS has been fully refurbished and is totally reliable, I thought I materialised to get a bearing to synchronise the temporal balance codes, and I discovered that the date here is December 24th. Christmas Eve. Tegan's face lit up. Yes, relatively speaking. Perhaps not in your personal timeline, but as far as this portion of space-time is concerned, yes. Turlough grimaced. Christmas. They always made such a fuss about it at Brendan. I never enjoyed it myself. Ah, Turlough, don't be such a spoil sport, said Tegan. I love Christmas. A sudden harsh beeping cut across the gentle hum of the room, and a small red light started to flash on one of the panels. What was that about the new console being totally reliable, Doctor? Tegan asked. Turlough hurried over to look at the readout. It's not an internal fault. It's a signal. It's a mayday! The Doctor darted around the console, his fingers dancing over the multitude of buttons and switches. It's a long way off, but if I could just lock on to the beacon... With a grind of ancient engines, the central column of the TARDIS started to rise and fall as the Doctor sent it spinning into the vortex. From past experience, Tegan knew to hang on tightly to the edge of the console, but the fight was short and, by the Doctor's standards, relatively smooth. As soon as the time rotor stopped moving, the Doctor bounded over to the scanner control, opening the two huge shutters that concealed the TARDIS's view screen. Tegan and Turlough hurried to join him, and looked out at a tiny spacecraft hanging before them in the inky blackness of space. Below it was a vast, pale planet, the surface gleaming brightly as if covered in frost. A planet of ice. Quite the fitting place to visit at Christmas. Is that the spacecraft sending the Mayday? Asked Tegan. Yes. The Doctor peered at the screen intently. It's a bit weedy. It's a fighter craft, said Turlough. Oh, great. Have you landed us in the middle of a war, Doctor? No? The Doctor sounded bemused. There's no conflict that I'm aware of in this part of the galaxy. Not for centuries yet, at least. Doctor? Turlough pointed at the screen. It seems we're not the only ones that have answered the Mayday. A huge, bulky freighter was slowly sliding into view, plasma venting from its engines as it came to a halt next to the fighter craft. The Doctor leaped into action, readjusting the controls and bringing the console to life again. "Where are we going now?" asked Tegan. "To say hello to our fellow visitors." The cool, dark calm of the freighter's cargo bay was shattered by the grinding, rasping noise of the TARDIS materializing. The freighter's complex recognition software immediately scanned the new arrival, identifying the lettering of the TARDIS as human in origin, sent a series of commands to environmental control. There was a soft hiss as atmosphere was transferred to the hold. Dozens of LED lights flickered into life, bathing everything in a soft, bluish glow. With the rattle of the lock, the TARDIS door swung open, and the Doctor stepped out into the cargo bay, sniffing the air distastefully. "Is it safe?" Tegan's voice came from behind him. "Yes, a bit musty, but quite breathable." Putting on his hat, the Doctor wandered across to a huge bank of cargo containers. Tegan stepped out of the TARDIS and looked around cautiously. Turlough followed her, pulling the door closed behind him. The Doctor was examining one of the hundreds of cargo containers that lined the hold, and Tegan moved to join him. "What have you found?" "Oh, nothing much, just the destination of the freighter." Turlough peered at the signage stamped on the boxes. "Supplies to the colony on Lowen." "No, I've not heard of that." "I'm not surprised," said the Doctor. "Lowen's a very long way out indeed, right at the tip of one of the spiral arms in the Milky Way. It's about as far as human colonists have managed to get." "So this freighter is carrying supplies for the colonists?" Tegan peered at the rows of boxes. "That's a lot of supplies." "Yes. Now, I wonder where—" Before the Doctor could finish, a door at the far end of the cargo bay slid open with a hiss of hydraulics. A tall, slim robot was gliding through it towards them, mechanical arms flapping agitatedly. "Please stand back! Unauthorized personnel are not allowed to interfere with the cargo." The Doctor held up his hands apologetically. "Sorry." Tegan was less contrite, stepping towards the robot with her hands on her hips. "We weren't interfering. We were just looking." The robot came to a halt, camera eyes scanning the three time travellers. "This is a restricted area. I shall have to file a report." Lights began to flash in a frantic pattern across the robot's chest. "Excuse me." The Doctor grasped Tegan by the shoulders and gently pulled her to one side. "May I ask who we are addressing?" The chasing lights slowed. "I am P11Y SCA of the long-range freighter St. Nicholas." "SCA?" The Doctor frowned. "Society for Creative Anachronism." The robots gave the electronic equivalent of a sigh of frustration. "Senior Command Automation." "Command? You're in charge here?" asked Tegan. "I most certainly am. Now, if you will please stand aside, I must make a full inventory of the cargo." The robot gave a series of electronic beeps and clicks. Immediately, hundreds of smaller robots emerged from a multitude of hatches in the hangar walls and started swarming all over the cargo containers. Tegan stared in amazement. "Are there no people on this ship?" This is an unmanned freighter," the Doctor explained. "Probably sent to Lowen centuries before the settlers themselves, allowing them to travel with minimal weight. They were a fascinating breed, those surly stellar pioneers. I recall that most—" "Doctor," Turlough's voice cut across him, "the history lesson is very interesting, but there's a reason we came here, remember? The Mayday signal?" Turlough was looking out a huge observation window that ran the length of the cargo bay at the fighter craft, which was still floating serenely alongside them. "You're quite right, Turlough," the Doctor said, turning swiftly back to PO11Y. "We came here to answer a Mayday call. I'm assuming that's the reason you're here too?" "A false alarm. An unnecessary diversion from our scheduled route." "Really?" The Doctor looked puzzled. "You detected no survivors?" "The fighter craft is unmanned. Its distress beacon was an automatic. These questions are wasting time. We need to get this ship back on schedule." "But if there's no one on board the ship, then who—" "Doctor!" Turlough looked alarmed. He was pointing out of the observation window. "There's another ship here. It's uncloaking." The Doctor and Tegan hurried over just in time to see a huge spherical spacecraft shimmer into view. Oh no. A Sontaran ship. Back into the TARDIS, quickly! But before they could move, there was a harsh crackling sound, and blue lightning lanced around the cargo bay. A squat figure in jet black armour and wearing a gleaming domed helmet materialised in front of them. The figure was flanked by a squad of angular metallic robots, each of which appeared poised to attack at any moment. The squat figure raised a stubby, three-fingered claw to point a slim tube at the Doctor's head. The Doctor slowly raised his hands. "You will not move," the rasping voice echoed around the cargo bay. "This ship is now under my control." "And you are?" "Lieutenant Blast of the Sontaran gunship Apocalypse." "This is outrageous!" PO-11Y glided towards the Sontaran, arms aloft. "You are commanding an act of piracy!" "Piracy?" snarled Blast. "How insulting! This is an act of war." He swung the slim tube towards the robot. There was a bright flare, a sharp crackle of energy, and PO-11Y's head exploded in a shower of brilliant sparks. The robot stood upright for a moment, arms still waving about, then crashed to the floor with a deafening clang. Immediately, all the other robots working in the cargo bay ground to a halt, lights fading from their casings. The Doctor took a step towards the Sontaran, his face clouded with anger. "That was not necessary!" Brast swung his blaster back at the Doctor, hissing at his guard robots. "Restrain these humanoids!" The angular robots flanking the Sontaran surged forward, their metallic mouths chittering frantically, and wrapped metal arms and octopus legs around the Doctor and his companions. Once his captives were secure, Brast thrust his blaster back into his belt and reached up to remove his helmet. Tegan gasped as his potato-like features were revealed. "Sontarans are not exactly the most photogenic of species," quipped the Doctor. Brast tucked his helmet under his arm and leaned closer, scrutinising the Doctor carefully. "You know of my species?" "We've crossed paths once or twice." Brast snatched a triangular instrument from his belt and thrust it into the Doctor's face. "Ah! A Time Lord! I might have guessed the smug superiority should have given you away." His lip curled in contempt. "Pacifist degenerate." Brast now shifted his device to Tegan. His wide mouth twisted into a snarl of disappointment as the scanner results were displayed. "A Terran female? Pah! Worthless." "Worthless?" Tegan was furious. "Now, just 1 minute. Tegan," the Doctor's voice had gone up an octave, "this really isn't the time to start an argument." Brast ignored them. He was now staring at Turlough through narrowed eyes. "Now this is a specimen with some promise." He examined the readout on his scanner with growing excitement. "Yes! More than adequate!" At an unspoken command from Brast, the robot restraining Turlough released his grip. Its legs withdrawing into its casing. "You will come with me!" "Where are you taking him?" Tegan shouted. "Brast!" The Doctor's voice had hardened. "I'm warning you. If you harm that boy..." Without even a glance in their direction, Brast snatched the blaster from his belt and fired. The Doctor and Tegan were enveloped in a ball of spitting, fizzing scarlet energy. Turlough stared in horror at the contorted, agonised faces of his friends. "Stop it! You're hurting them!" Brast's eyes didn't leave Turlough's face. "What is your name and rank?" "Please!" Turlough took a step towards his companions, but 2 of the Sontaran's robots blocked his way, chittering menacingly. "What is your name and rank?" "My name is Vislaw Turlough. I'm a junior ensign commander in the Trion Navy." "Excellent." Brast lowered his blaster, and the awful ball of red energy faded away. Turlough pushed past the robots and hurried over to the Doctor and Tegan. The Doctor was on his knees, gasping for breath, and Turlough led a trembling Tegan to sit down on one of the cargo crates. "Let that be a warning for you. Disobedience of any kind will result in more suffering for your friends." "Are you all right?" Turlough was crouched in front of Tegan, concerned by how pale she had become. I feel like every nerve in my body has been scraped. A neural lash, the doctor said, getting to his feet and wincing as he rubbed the back of his neck. Typically nasty Sontaran weapon. And if you don't move, Treon, I'll do it again, snarled Brast. Tegan's tensed as the Sontaran's hand dropped to the hilt of his blaster once more. All right! What is it that you want me to do? Brast grabbed hold of Turlough's arm with a stubby claw and dragged him towards the window. Are you capable of flying that? He pointed at the fighter craft floating outside in the blackness. Yes, I should think so. But why? Then you and I shall do battle! To the death! Tegan watched with horror as Brast forced Turlough to clamber into a bulky pressure suit and marched him to the airlock. What's going on, Doctor? She whispered. Why is this Sontaran doing this? Brast is a juvenile. Probably only a few hours old. Hours? Tegan gaped at him. Yes, the Sontarans are a clone species. It's how they maintain numbers despite ever mounting casualties in their perpetual war with the Rutan Empire. Okay, so they like fighting, I get that. But where does Turlough fit into this? My guess is that Brast is undergoing some sort of ritual initiation, a rite of passage to prove his worth as a warrior. He's assessed the three of us and decided that Turlough is the best candidate to give him a good battle. And presumably an honourable victory. Well, that's barbaric! Very similar to the initiation rites found in dozens of early cultures on your own planet. There's a big difference between that and this. She stared out of the window, watching Turlough spacewalk towards the sleek fighter craft, one of the Sontaran robots alongside him. Is Turlough really going to be able to fly that thing, Doctor? Though I find it best never to underestimate what Turlough is capable of, said the Doctor. He frowned, deep in thought. My guess is that Brast killed the original pilot of that ship and used the distress beacon to lure in another opponent. You are quite right, Time Lord. The Doctor and Tegan turned from the window to find Brast standing behind them. The pilot was a coward, a deserter from a Skodon battle fleet. He turned his ship and fled rather than face me in single combat. So you did kill him. Unfortunately, I was denied that pleasure. By the time I had tracked him down, he had merely run out of air. There was no honour in suffocation. That's awful. Tegan didn't try to hide her revulsion. This is no consequence. His actions indicate that he would not have made a worthy opponent. His ship, however, remains of use, and the boy, Turlough, shows promise. The Sontaran grinned horribly. You two will remain here to witness my triumph. Brast touched a control on his belt, and there was a blaze of energy as he dematerialized. Tegan turned to the Doctor in despair. Doctor, we've got to do something. The Doctor said nothing. He was staring out of the window as the Sontaran ship powered up and swung round to face the fighter craft piloted by Turlough. The fight was about to commence. You understand the controls of the ship? Brast's eager face stared at Turlough from the screen on the fighter craft's control console. Turlough nodded. Yes, I think so. That is excellent. In case you have any ideas about fleeing or using this ship to somehow rescue your friends, the robot behind you has been given very clear instructions. Brast let his threat hanging in the air. Turlough glanced over his shoulder at the robot wrapped round the rear of the pilot's chair, its insect-like mouth clacking frantically. I understand, said Turlough, his mouth dry. Then we can begin. I will release control of the fighter craft to you in precisely 20 seconds. Brast pulled on his helmet and gave a stiff salute. For the honour of Sontar! The control console screen went dead. Turlough gripped the control column of the fighter craft. It was true that he had flown ships of this kind before, but not for an extremely long time. He glanced out at the Sontaran ship, hanging malevolently before him. Brast was a trained fighter, a creature bred for war. What chance did Turlough have against a warrior like that? Unless a plan began to form in Turlough's brain. It was risky, but it just might work. Then, before he could have any second thoughts, the controls of his ship burst into life. Tegan and the Doctor watched as Turlough's fighter craft surged forward on a collision course with Brast's ship. At the last possible moment it pulled up, its cannons blazing with energy. Taken by surprise at such a bold attack, the Sontaran's craft stood little chance. Energy bolts raked across the spherical hull, cutting huge, ragged gouges in the metal. "Oh, well played, Turlough!" shouted the Doctor. Tegan's eyes were wide with astonishment. "What on earth is he doing?" "Exactly the opposite of what was expected." The Doctor turned to her excitedly. Brast mistakenly assumed that Turlough would be terrified, that he would do anything to try to avoid a fight. All Sontarans are fundamentally arrogant. They operate like a cat playing with a mouse. The last thing they expect is for the mouse to strike first. He turned back towards the window, watching as Turlough's ship arced away into the blackness of space. "Might he just make the Sontaran angry?" Tegan asked nervously. "Oh, I expect he'll be furious," exclaimed the Doctor. "But if Turlough has done enough damage to that ship, then it will give him a distinct advantage. Now, let's see if I can tip the balance a bit more in Turlough's favour." Brast struggled to bring the chaos inside his cockpit under control. A dozen small fires spluttered and popped on various control consoles. The air was thick with acrid smoke. Service robots darted around him, smothering the fires with bursts of extinguishing foam and rerouting circuits from damaged sections. Brast stabbed savagely at the weapon controls as Turlough's sleek fighter craft swept past him, but none of the automatic targeting systems were working. "So, our Treon is not as timid as he seems." Beneath the helmet, Brast's lipless mouth cracked into an unpleasant smile. "Excellent! My victory will be all the greater!" Disengaging all the automatic systems, Brast took manual control of the ship, forcing the protesting engines into life. He swung about and set a course to follow his opponent's craft. "You want me to do what?" Tegan glared at the Doctor. "Tegan, we don't have a lot of time. Turlough has been lucky so far, but if we don't act quickly..." "I'm in no mood to have my nervous system scraped again, thank you very much." "It is extremely unlikely that these robots have any kind of neurological weapons. Brast is something of a sadist, as I'm sure you've noticed. If there is any punishment to be meted out, he'll want to do it himself. The worst that's going to happen is that the robots will restrain you." All right. Tegan held her hands up in resignation. "Tell me again what the plan is." The Doctor nodded at the charred remains of PO-11Y, which lay on the cargo bay floor. PO-11Y called itself a Senior Command Automaton. That implies a Master Positronic Override Circuit. If I can gain access to that circuit, I should be able to take control of all of Brast's robots. How long will you need? Not long. You have to distract the Sontaran robots to give me time to make the necessary adjustments. I hope you're right about this, Doctor. Braveheart, Tegan." Tegan rolled her eyes. Taking a deep breath, she turned to where the robots were clustered, their gleaming black eyes glinting in the harsh light of the cargo bay. "Hey! How much longer are you going to keep us here?" As Tegan moved towards them, the robots rose up on their strong metal legs, antennae twitching. "I demand that you give us food and water!" One of the robots moved to block her way, but with a sudden burst of speed, Tegan ducked past it and sprinted towards the TARDIS. There was a sudden flurry of movement as the robots surged after her, clicking furiously. The Doctor seized his chance. He hurled himself forward, sliding across the floor and coming to a halt next to PO-11Y's prone remains. Stepping on his glasses, he fumbled with a plate of the robot's metallic torso, pulling it free and peering into a cavity. A box studded with tiny buttons was nestled among a tangle of wires and circuit boards. "Yes, I thought as much." The Doctor reached into the cavity, fingers dancing over the tiny controls. "Now, if I remembered the codes for Tellurian drives properly..." From behind him he could hear Tegan shouting in anger as the robots struggled to restrain her. It would only be a matter of moments before their attention returned to him. Doctor! The Count! A loud metallic skittering told the doctor that the robots were on their way. He was out of time. He keyed in the final code and hit the restart command. Turlough knew that he had exhausted all of his options. Brass had not only managed to catch him, but was matching him move for move, even though his ship must have been crippled. The Sontaran was just too good a pilot, too good a warrior. Turlough wrenched the control column to one side as another searing bolt of energy tore past his starboard wing. The fighter craft banked sharply, but Brass was right on his tail. With every desperate move he made to avoid Brass's attacks, the Sontaran got that little bit closer.
Warning! Weapon lock.
The console in front of him blared.
Warning! Weapon lock. Weapon lock.
Turlough closed his eyes, waiting for the blast that would finish him off. But it never came.
I'm sorry about that, Turlough. You know me, always leaving things to the last minute.
Turlough opened one eye. Doctor?
Of course.
The doctor sounded indignant.
You didn't think I was just going to abandon you, did you?
It took Turlough a few moments to realise that the doctor's voice wasn't actually coming from the control console, but from the Sontaran robot behind him. How on earth?
Access to the command circuit of a senior command automaton. I imagine that Brass is equally surprised.
Brass was more than surprised. He was furious. He had finally got Turlough's fighter craft lined up in his sights and had his finger on the button that would unleash destruction when everything had gone dead. He stabbed frantically at the controls.
Report!
He snarled at the robots around him.
Explain reason for malfunction!
That would be my fault, I'm afraid.
What?
Brass growled with a voice booming from the vocal synthesizer of the service robots.
Is that you, Time Lord?
It is. Now, you'll notice that your metal friends are now doing what I tell them to. And I've told them to take you back to your fleet. I'm sure you'll have a splendid time explaining to your commander-in-chief how you were bested by a boy, a pacifist degenerate, and a worthless human female.
Brass fumbled with his helmet, feeling a pang of fear for the first time in his short life.
No, Doctor, you can't.
Goodbye, Brass.
Before the Sontaran could react, the robots activated the warp drive of his ship. Brass was thrust back into the padding of his chair by the acceleration, helpless to stop his ship from carrying him back to his superiors, and the punishment they would inevitably deal him. The doctor let out a deep sigh as the Sontaran ship warped out of existence in a blaze of ionized particles. Good riddance. Now, let's see what we can do about getting this freighter back on course. A short time later, Turlough emerged to the airlock and was greeted by a relieved Tegan. You had us worried. She gave him a smile that was almost admiring. How did you learn to fly like that? Turlough shifted uncomfortably. I had a few lessons when I was younger. Where's the doctor? Over here, Turlough. The doctor's voice rang out from the other side of the control bay. Turlough and Tegan wandered over to where he was busily rewiring PO-11Y's command circuit into the torso of one of the Sontaran robots. What a mess, said Tegan, eyeing the robot distrustfully. It's not easy marrying up the two completely disparate technologies, said the doctor, sounding a tad hurt. Nonetheless, I think that... Yes! I've managed to cobble something together that will last just long enough to get this cargo to the colonists on Lowen. Just in time for Christmas? Asked Tegan hopefully. Yes. The doctor smiled and patted the Sontaran robot on the top of its silver head. Thanks to one of Sontar's little helpers. planet of ice. Quite the fitting place to visit at Christmas.